In many jurisdictions, parents assume they have complete freedom to decide who inherits their estate. If they choose to exclude a child from a will, that decision is final. Under Vietnamese law, the answer is more structured. Vietnamese law recognizes the right of an individual to make a will and dispose of property. This is a fundamental civil right. However, that right operates within statutory boundaries. Under Vietnamese inheritance law, children belong to the first line of statutory heirs. If no valid will exists, children inherit equally with the surviving spouse and parents of the deceased. This rule applies regardless of nationality for assets located in Vietnam. Vietnamese law protects certain heirs through compulsory share provisions. Minor children and dependent adult children may be entitled to a statutory portion of the estate. This protection limits complete disinheritance. Yes, a parent may exclude a child in a will. However, exclusion does not automatically eliminate all inheritance rights. If the child qualifies as a compulsory heir, statutory protections may apply. A compulsory share represents a minimum portion of the estate reserved for protected heirs. If a will allocates less than this statutory minimum, the court may adjust the distribution. Mandatory rules prevail over testamentary preference. If the child is an adult, financially independent, and not classified as a compulsory heir, disinheritance is more likely to stand. Vietnamese courts will still review formal validity and fairness. Context matters. Vietnamese law provides limited statutory grounds under which an heir may be deprived of the right to inherit. These grounds are defined in the Civil Code and include serious misconduct, such as intentionally infringing upon the life, health, or dignity of the deceased, or violating inheritance obligations. However, disqualification is not presumed. It must fall squarely within statutory provisions and be supported by clear evidence. Exclusion based purely on personal disagreement is not sufficient. For removable property located in Vietnam, Vietnamese inheritance law governs succession directly. If a child qualifies as a compulsory heir under the Civil Code, exclusion from such property may not be fully effective. Courts may reduce the testamentary distribution to preserve the statutory minimum share. Asset location determines the governing legal framework. A will drafted abroad that excludes a child does not automatically override Vietnamese compulsory heir protections for assets located in Vietnam. Even where the will is formally valid under foreign law, Vietnamese courts will assess compliance with domestic mandatory provisions. Testamentary intent cannot displace statutory protection of compulsory heirs in relation to Vietnamese assets. Disinheritance disputes often arise in second marriages. Children from a prior relationship may challenge a will favoring a new spouse. Forced heirship rules frequently shape the outcome. Some parents consider transferring assets during their lifetime to reduce exposure to compulsory heir claims. While lifetime transfers are legally permissible in principle, they must comply with Vietnamese civil law and must not constitute fraudulent evasion of statutory inheritance rights. If a transaction is proven to be a sham or intended solely to defeat lawful heirship rights, it may be subject to legal challenge. Structure must reflect genuine transfer, not artificial avoidance. If the estate includes shares in a Vietnamese company, excluding a child may affect corporate control disputes. Inheritance law and corporate governance intersect. Planning must anticipate operational consequences. Excluding a child significantly increases litigation risk. Courts scrutinize testamentary capacity, undue influence, and statutory compliance. Procedural defects can invalidate broader estate plans. Clear drafting, proper witnessing, and compliance with formal requirements reduce the likelihood of successful challenge. Ambiguity invites dispute. Precision protects intent within legal boundaries. Under Vietnamese tax law, inheritance received between certain close relatives, including parents and children, may benefit from personal income tax exemptions. However, exclusion of a child in a will does not remove reporting obligations for other heirs. Administrative compliance remains mandatory regardless of internal family decisions. If the child resides abroad or holds foreign nationality, parallel legal proceedings may occur. Different jurisdictions may treat disinheritance differently. Coordination reduces inconsistent outcomes. Parents seeking to structure inheritance differently should evaluate compulsory heir status early. Consider asset allocation, marital property regime, and corporate structuring in advance. Planning must operate within statutory limits. If you own assets in Vietnam, do not assume that disinheritance clauses drafted abroad will automatically be enforced. Vietnamese forced heirship rules may apply to protected children. Review estate plans proactively. Under Vietnamese law, you may exclude a child in a will, but that exclusion is subject to compulsory heir protections and public policy constraints. Testamentary freedom is structured, not absolute. Effective estate planning requires alignment with these legal boundaries rather than assumption they can be avoided. If you are considering excluding a child from your estate under Vietnamese law, do not rely on assumptions drawn from other jurisdictions. Compulsory heir protections under the Vietnamese Civil Code operate automatically and cannot be ignored through drafting alone. Before finalizing any estate structure involving assets in Vietnam, review the status of protected heirs, the marital property regime, and potential corporate implications. To ensure your estate plan aligns with Vietnamese inheritance law and withstands judicial scrutiny, contact LTS Law at lts.com.vn for structured legal guidance. In Vietnam, disinheritance is possible, but only within clearly defined statutory limits. Effective planning works within the law, not against it.